Jonathan Blake here. Stop scrolling. In the last few hours, reports of an extraordinary constitutional standoff have started circulating, involving the 25th Amendment, conflicting chains of command, and urgent legal filings that could test the limits of presidential power in ways America has never seen before. If even part of what's being alleged is accurate, this isn't routine political drama. This would be a stress test of the Constitution itself. Tonight, we're breaking down the timeline, what the 25th Amendment actually says, how a legal challenge could unfold, and what would have to happen for a true constitutional crisis to occur. Before we go any further, hit that like button and subscribe, because when institutional power is being tested, clarity matters more than panic, and facts matter more than noise. Let's get into it. Stop what you're doing. I need just 30 seconds of your full attention. What I'm about to show you is a document that leaked 47 minutes ago. It shows that the current president of the United States is trying to take over the government right now in a way that goes against the Constitution. The legal trick he's using has never been tried before in American history. 3 hours ago, someone inside the White House secretly sent files to 7 news reporters. I have one of those files. What's inside explains why the president has locked himself in his living quarters at the White House, why his own lawyers are scared, and why we are closer to the Constitution falling apart than at any time since the Civil War. This is not just political drama. This is not just two parties disagreeing. This is a sitting president who looked at the 25th Amendment, a rule for removing a president who can't do his job, found a way around it, and is using that trick to make himself impossible to remove for the next 21 days. During those 21 days, he controls the military, the nuclear weapons, and all the power of the president while Congress and the courts try to figure out how to stop him. Subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on notifications. What I'm going to explain won't be covered correctly anywhere else. The big news networks don't have these documents yet. You're seeing this first. Before I show you the document, you need to understand the order of events because the timing matters. 3:14 a.m. Eastern Time. The Vice President and 8 cabinet members, the President's top advisors, signed an official paper using Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. This paper said the president cannot do his job properly. According to the Constitution, the moment this paper reached Congress, the vice president should have become the acting president immediately, like flipping a light switch. That should have happened at 3:14 a.m., 32:47 a.m. But here's where things went wrong. And just 33 minutes after the paper was delivered, White House lawyers filed an emergency request with a federal court. Their argument, and this is very important, is that Section 4 requires a judge to review everything before any power can change hands. There is no legal basis for this claim. None. The 25th Amendment doesn't mention courts at all. It doesn't require judges. It only talks about Congress, not courts. But filing that request did one important thing. It bought time. 6:22 a.m. The president posted on Truth Social, his social media site. I am still your commander-in-chief. Any orders from other sources are not valid. The Pentagon then received 2 different sets of orders within minutes. The generals are frozen. They don't know which chain of command is real. 9:15 a.m. The Secret Service, the president's bodyguards, split into 2 groups. Reports say there was an actual physical fight between agents outside the Oval Office. 11:38 a.m. The leaked document I mentioned arrived in my email. What the leaked document says. Let me read you exactly what this document says. This is a legal memo written by White House lawyers marked attorney-client, privileged, do not share. Here are the 4 key parts. Presidential powers cannot be transferred without the Supreme Court deciding the president is unable to serve. Section 4 of the 25th Amendment is unconstitutional against the Constitution because it doesn't include court oversight. Any attempt to remove the president without court approval is insurrection, an uprising against the government under federal law. The president is allowed to use all his executive powers to keep the government running during this legal fight. Do you see what just happened? He's not arguing that he's healthy enough to be president. He's arguing that the 25th Amendment itself is invalid, that it can't be used against him unless the Supreme Court agrees first. And here's the scary part. There's a 48-hour window where he might actually be legally right. The Constitution says power transfers immediately, but it doesn't say who makes that transfer happen. If the president refuses to leave, who physically removes him? The courts have never decided this. Congress needs 21 days to act. The military is getting conflicting orders. In that gap between what the Constitution says and how it gets enforced, he's building a legal wall around himself. And he's not doing this alone. Let me show you who's helping him carry out this plan. Because what you're about to hear explains why they're willing to risk everything. This is not his regular legal team. 3 new lawyers showed up at the White House this morning. These aren't the lawyers you've seen on TV defending him before. These are experts in emergency constitutional law, and their background should worry every American. The lead lawyer defended a military general during a failed takeover attempt in Bolivia in 2019. The second lawyer defended government officials in Venezuela who shut down their legislature in 2017. The third spent 4 years working for authoritarian governments in Eastern Europe, specializing in what she calls keeping governments running during constitutional changes. Do you see the pattern? These aren't lawyers who defend people in normal court cases. These are lawyers who help leaders stay in power when institutions try to remove them. Their strategy, which I can see clearly in the leaked documents, follows a 5-step plan. Step 1. Flood the courts with emergency requests. Create conflicting rulings in different courts. Make the legal situation so messy that no single court can sort it out quickly. Step 2. Force the issue to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court moves slowly. Even for emergencies, they need days or weeks. During that time, he stays in power. Step 3. Argue that removing a president requires the highest possible legal standard. Not just a cabinet vote, not just Congress acting, but clear Supreme Court approval. Step 4. Claim that anyone trying to remove him without that approval is committing insurrection. This flips the whole story. Suddenly, he's the victim, and the vice president is the attacker. Step 5. Run out the clock. If he can survive 48 hours, the immediate crisis fades. If he can survive 21 days, Congress probably can't get the 2-3 vote needed to remove him permanently. If you're starting to see how planned this was, hit that like button right now. The algorithm needs to know this matters. This is not random chaos. This is a legal strategy that has been planned for months. The cabinet members who didn't sign. Now let me tell you about the 7 cabinet members who didn't sign that declaration because their role is just as important as the 8 who did. 8 cabinet members signed the 25th Amendment Declaration. That's a constitutional majority, but 7 didn't sign. When you look at who those 7 people are, a disturbing pattern shows up. The Secretary of State was appointed 2 months ago. No prior government experience. He's been the president's personal friend for 15 years. The acting Secretary of Defense was promoted just last week. He hasn't been confirmed by the Senate. He serves only as long as the president wants him to with no job protection. The Attorney General has known the president for 30 years. They were business partners before politics. Their families go on vacation together. And the other 4 cabinet members who refused to sign, all of them were appointed in the last 90 days. Every single one. Do you see what happened here? This wasn't an accident. Over the past 3 months, the president has been systematically replacing cabinet members with people who owe him everything. People who have no independent political support. People whose entire careers depend on his approval. And those 7 loyal members aren't just sitting around. Multiple sources say the president held a meeting with them at 7:30 this morning in the White House residence. They're acting as a second cabinet. They're getting briefings. They're making recommendations. They're sending instructions to federal agencies as if the 25th Amendment Declaration never happened. The president is claiming that the vice president's actions are just suggestions, that until a court says otherwise, he's still the only legitimate leader, and his loyal cabinet is operating as if that's true. This creates a constitutional nightmare nobody expected. You have 8 cabinet members who say the president can't do his job. You have 7 cabinet members who say he's fine. You have a vice president trying to run the government from the Eisenhower Executive Office building. And you have a president giving orders from the White House. Residents. 2 governments, 2 chains of command, both claiming they're the legitimate one. Now, let's talk about what's happening at the Pentagon right now, because this is where things get truly frightening. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is currently in the tank. That's the nickname for the most secure meeting room at the Pentagon, where military leaders meet during real national security emergencies. He's been there since 6 a.m. He's not taking calls from the vice president. He's also not taking calls from the president. According to sources who know directly, he's talking to military lawyers trying to answer a question no chairman has ever had to face. Whose orders does the military follow? Here's why this matters so much. The president, wherever he goes, is followed by a military aide carrying a briefcase. You've probably seen it. It's called the nuclear football. It contains the codes to launch nuclear weapons, communication equipment, and everything needed to authorize a nuclear strike. The vice president also has a military aide with an identical briefcase. Normally, the vice president's codes don't work. They're a backup. They only become active if the president is confirmed dead or officially unable to serve. At 3:14 this morning, when that Section 4 declaration was delivered, the vice president constitutionally became acting president according to the text of the amendment. That means his launch codes should have turned on at that moment, and the president's codes should have turned off. But who actually makes that happen? Who flips that switch? That decision goes through the National Military Command Center at the Pentagon, and right now, nobody knows what the actual status of those codes is. I've seen a leaked military memo from U.S. Strategic Command. Let me read you the key sentence. Until judicial or congressional clarity is achieved. Regarding legitimate executive authority, Strategic Command will not execute any launch orders from any source without consensus verification from the full chain of command. Do you understand what that means? The U.S. military just told both the president and the vice president that neither of them can launch nuclear weapons. Our nuclear defense, the foundation of American national security for 75 years, depends on certainty. It depends on our enemies knowing without question that American nuclear forces are under clear command. The moment there's confusion about who controls those weapons, our defense weakens. Our enemies are watching this right now. They're watching the American chain of command break apart in real time, and they're making calculations. But that's not even the most dangerous part of what's happening. While you've been watching the constitutional crisis, while the media has been focused on the 25th Amendment drama, something else has been unfolding. The vice president can't enter the Oval Office. The Secret Service won't let him in. So he set up a command center in the Eisenhower Executive Office building right next to the White House. That building now works as an alternate presidential headquarters. Cabinet members who signed the declaration are coming and going. Staff are coordinating policy. The vice president is trying to govern from there, making decisions on domestic policy, sending guidance to federal agencies, doing the work of the presidency from a conference room. Meanwhile, the president remains in the White House residence, fully staffed, fully operating. He's signing executive orders. He's calling agency heads directly. He's directing federal policy through personal relationships built over 4 years in office. And here's the result. America now has 2 executive branches running at the same time. 2 people giving orders, 2 governments claiming they're legitimate, and federal agencies are getting contradictory instructions. The FDA received guidance from both the president and the vice president this morning about vaccine policy, completely different directions. The State Department got conflicting instructions about communications with Iran. The IRS doesn't know which tax rules to follow. This isn't a theory anymore. This isn't a constitutional thought experiment. The actual functioning of the federal government is breaking down in real time because nobody knows who's actually in charge. And the international consequences are already happening in ways that should frighten every American. NATO held an emergency meeting 2 hours ago. It was called by Germany, not the United States. Think about that. Our closest military ally called a crisis meeting about us without us because they don't know who to call. The British Prime Minister tried to reach the White House this morning about a joint military operation in the Middle East. His call was put on hold for 27 minutes because no one could figure out who was allowed to take it. Eventually, an assistant told him the situation was fluid and someone would call back. No one has. Article 5 of the NATO treaty says that an attack on one member country is treated as an attack on all. This principle has kept peace in Europe for 75 years. But Article 5 depends on certainty, on knowing that the American president can make decisions and those decisions will be carried out. Right now, NATO commanders don't have that certainty, and our enemies have noticed. Chinese warships are doing unusual maneuvers near Taiwan. Russian troop movements along the Ukrainian border have sped up. Iran just announced it's increasing uranium enrichment to 20%. These are not coincidences. When America looks divided, when our chain of command is visibly broken, enemies test for weakness. They push boundaries. They take risks they would never take if they thought American power was organized and focused. The financial markets are crashing. Dow futures are down 1,800 points. Treasury yields are spiking as investors run to safety. Gold just hit an all-time high. The dollar is weakening against the euro and the yen. This isn't normal market ups and downs. This is a crisis of confidence in American government. But the international chaos isn't even the most immediate threat. The most immediate threat is what's happening on American soil right now. Armed groups are mobilizing. The president posted on Truth Social 40 minutes ago, "Patriots defend the Constitution." The Second Amendment exists for moments like this. Groups that monitor militias are reporting movement toward Washington, D.C. from at least 11 states. These aren't unarmed protesters. These are organized groups with military training and weapons. 14 states have activated National Guard units. But here's the nightmare. In Washington, D.C., the National Guard answers to the president, not a governor. The district doesn't have a governor. So, if the vice president, who is constitutionally the acting president, orders the National Guard to secure federal buildings, and the president issues a counter order telling those same soldiers to stand down, whose command is legal? Who do those soldiers obey? Every commander, every soldier, every officer is now making individual judgments about which orders to follow, and the wrong choice could be catastrophic. Law enforcement is paralyzed. D.C. Metropolitan Police are following the vice president's orders. Capitol Police leadership is split. The FBI director hasn't made a public statement, and the Secret Service is literally facing each other across the White House perimeter. Agents who have worked together for years, who have protected presidents side by side, are now on opposite sides of a constitutional divide. We've seen this before. We watched it 3 years ago. A president questioning legitimacy, calling supporters to gather in Washington. Law enforcement caught off guard, except this time he's still inside the building. This time he controls some of the security forces. This time the stakes are much higher. Let me explain the 3 scenarios for how this ends, because one of these 3 things will happen within the next 72 hours. Scenario 1, the courts step in. The D.C. Circuit Court could rule by tomorrow morning. They could order the president to obey the 25th Amendment. They could confirm that power has already transferred, but even if they do, he's already signaled he won't comply. He'll appeal to the Supreme Court. And that brings us back to the same problem. The Supreme Court won't rule fast enough. Scenario 2. Congress decides the Vice President and Cabinet send a second declaration to Congress within 4 days, restating that the President can't serve. Congress must meet within 48 hours. They have 21 days to vote. Removing the President permanently requires 2/3 of both the House and the Senate. That means 67 votes in the Senate and 290 votes in the House. Right now, the math suggests maybe 55 to 60 senators would vote to remove and perhaps 250 House members. That's not enough. The bar is too high. He probably survives. Scenario 3. He wins the standoff. He runs out the clock. He creates enough legal chaos that courts can't rule clearly. Congress can't get 2/3. The immediate crisis fades. He declares victory and a precedent is set. The 25th Amendment becomes impossible to enforce. Any future president who faces a cabinet revolt will know exactly what to do. Tie it up in courts. Mobilize supporters. Wait it out. Share this video right now. People need to understand what's actually happening. The coverage you'll see everywhere else will miss the legal strategy. They'll cover the drama, but not the method. Send this to someone who needs to see it. The next 72 hours will determine whether the American Constitution can actually control a president who decides it doesn't apply to him. Let me tell you what this moment means for every president who comes after. Because if he succeeds, everything changes. If a president can ignore a 25th Amendment declaration, if he can tie up the courts long enough to outlast Congress, if he can mobilize supporters and wait out the crisis, then future presidents will know the amendment is meaningless. It becomes a paper tiger. Constitutional limits that exist on paper but can't actually be enforced are not limits at all. They're suggestions. And once that precedent is set, it doesn't get reversed. Every democracy that collapsed followed the same pattern. Germany in 1933, the Roman Republic in the 1st century BC, Venezuela over the past 2 decades. Legal norms were bent, institutions were paralyzed. A strong leader tested the limits. The system didn't push back hard enough, and a point of no return was crossed. Are we watching that happen right now in the United States of America? Here's the question that will define the next 48 hours. Who has more support from institutions? A president willing to defy the Constitution, or a vice president using it? The answer depends on whether courts act, whether the military stays neutral, whether Republicans in Congress break from the president, and whether public pressure builds fast enough to matter. Subscribe to this channel right now if you haven't already. Turn on notifications. When the DC Circuit rules, and they will rule soon, you'll see it here first. Hit that like button. It tells YouTube this story matters. It pushes this information to more people who need to understand what's actually happening. Share this video. The conversation about this constitutional crisis needs to go beyond partisan sides. Drop a comment. Tell me, do you think our institutions will hold, or are we crossing the point of no return? I'm watching every development. Pentagon briefings, court filings, leaked communications. When something breaks, and something will break, you'll know immediately. This is one of those moments where the future changes direction, where we find out if the American system of checks and balances is real or just for show. Stay with this story. Stay informed. I'll see you in the next one.